Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. Let's bring people up to speaker board and let's get started. I expect the live episodes to be about half hour from now on. I increased my position, for those of you who are interested, on MicroStrategy shorts this morning. And I think it's probably the most overvalued short that I have right now. I have about 6, 7 of them. And I might add more. I also added a little bit of position on GameStop. So there's a lot of companies out there who I believe are overpriced for one reason or another. But I think MicroStrategy, for the reasons that I explained in the pinned tweet, and I'll put it on YouTube as well. So any questions, comments, please request to speak. Otherwise, I'll be on mute. Daniel Suechik asks about Optimus announcement in Japan. I think these announcements from Tesla get way too much attention. I don't think they mean much, but Optimus obviously is going to be a global product, just like Cybertruck. But Optimus doesn't really have a working prototype just yet. They didn't even decide they didn't even finalize the hardware. I think the reliability needs to increase quite a bit. So we're years away from volume production, in my opinion. Any other questions? Let me know in the replies or come up to request to speak, or let me know in YouTube live chat. Otherwise, I'll be on mute. I'll pin at the top of our screens a tweet by Omar. So about the FSD tracker, FSD community tracker. So I proposed a coffee bet for anyone who wants to take it, which is also at the top of our screens, and Omar just reposted it with a response. So let's go through that response. But before that, let's bring in this new speaker real quick. Mike, go ahead. Mike, you have to unmute yourself for us to hear you. Okay. So I showed at the top a screenshot from the Tesla FSD community tracker, which currently shows 180 miles to critical disengagement, 98 city miles to critical disengagement, and 27 miles to disengagement. Disengagement is the same thing as intervention. And Elon uses the term intervention, so I go with intervention, but Elias chose to go with disengagement. It's the same thing. And Elon said recently that V13 is tracking to be approximately 500% better. So, first of all, the thing is, 500% better means 6 times better. So 6 times of what it is, but Elon has used in the past 5 times, 500% times, or 100% versus 2x interchangeably, even though it's mathematically incorrect. But anyway, so I took the lower end of that to be conservative and said, I think V13 will have less than 500 city miles to disengagement. So that's 98 times 5x. Okay. And whether that's, first version that's put out or the latest version before they go to V14 in 2026 is, either way, I think that's a. So if anybody wants to take that bet, you're welcome to reply to the tweet at the top and accept the bet. And the database we're going to use is going to be the FSD community tracker. Absent any information from another third party. So even Tesla announcing or Elon tweeting it is not enough for my purposes. It has to be a third party verified and independent, third party verified data, or absent that, FSD community tracker. And I don't expect Tesla to start announcing numbers anytime soon. So the bet is at the top of your screens. You can reply to it and accept the bet. And so Omar says, and I'll show this on YouTube. So Omar's response to that in a repost is, the problem with this bet is that they said 6x improvement for the fleet, not 6x improvement for any individual person. There is no way for you to know whether these users are reporting better software performance, less traffic in North Carolina, or a snow day. And again, just like you missed the point asking when Tesla would reach 1 million miles per intervention, you're missing the point here. The key right now is to increase user satisfaction. If they wanted to simply optimize for miles per intervention, they could slam on the brakes every time they saw anyone, 10x miles per click intervention. But what matters is not just driving up stats, but actually getting people to subscribe and renew. If you can just do that, everything changes. Okay. I mean, I'm just going off of what Elon said as the claim. So I'm betting against his timeline. And he said 500%. And that's the bet. But if anybody wants to bet on number of subscribers, happy to do that too. Either way, I think this thing is going to take years longer than people think. If anybody wants to come up and debate me on this, you're welcome to do so. I welcome all opposing views. And we can do it live if you want, or you can reply to any of my tweets. That's fine too. Until then, I'll be on mute. We have a question in YouTube live chat from Kevin King on MicroStrategy tweet at the top of your screens. It says the tweet at the top says the crypto community is levered to the gills, and Kevin King is asking how do they measure at what level the crypto community is levered. MicroStrategy has a disclosure. How is the leverage of others determined? I am not aware of any specific way of measuring how how somebody is levered, at a personal level, or how Bitcoin community is levered. So you would have to ask it to the person who made the claim. But I think the anecdotal evidence shows that people are buying call options, leveraging on margin for Bitcoin, and there's a lot of levered ETFs out there as well. So my guess is that it's based on anecdotal evidence, which is what I see as well. Hey, CDC, welcome.
Hey, Yaman, how are you? Sorry, I had to step out for a second. I've got a call incoming.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Give me 1 second. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. What do you think about this? Do you want to talk about Tesla or MicroStrategy or something else?
We could talk about both.
Okay.
I had
What do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you good.
What do you think about Tesla FSD community tracker? Do you think this bet I pinned at the top, V13, will be less than 500 city miles of disengagement, is a good metric to focus on?
I see both sides to it. It's a much smaller pool, but I do think it's a good metric to focus on. I don't think these people are necessarily people who are just inputting bad data or any data. I mean, these are people who are enthusiastic. I mean, if you had I forget the guy's name, who's the creator of the track, Elias, right? He was very enthusiastic about it, and some of the people who were, proponents of it and users of it were also proponents of FSD. So these are people who want it to work and just want a metric to track it. I personally got very encouraged about using it. I just, I just don't want to get that technical when I'm driving with things and all that. So I don't. But I think it's a decent metric. I mean, we have nothing else to really look at otherwise.
Yeah. Do you think 180 miles to critical disengagement is approximately your experience as well?
I think so. It probably would be less actually for me. I posted my experience on a 425-mile round trip, and this was from Chicagoland to University of Iowa City, and then back, and it's primarily all highway. And highways are, you don't even need FSD really. Autopilot does pretty good on highway itself, and now with the new highway stack, it's definitely a lot better. So even in that, I had 2 disengagements, so that puts you right around that 200 mile. But I think if I was driving more locally, for me it would be sooner. I don't think I have driven 180 combined miles without having to disengage on some sort of a critical level yet.
Yeah. And do you mind sharing what state you're in?
I'm in Illinois, in a suburb of Chicago.
Okay, cool.
And
so, all right, yeah. Go ahead.
And there's a lot of Teslas around us, okay, and so these are well frequented and traveled roads, so it's not like the data is not there for them, and yet there's some very familiar places where I've continued to have disengagements and problems.
Okay, thank you. All right, I mean, it sounds like when it comes to FSD, FSD community tracker, and where the miles to critical disengagement and miles to disengagement are, we're on the same page. So let's move on to, I mean, unless if somebody wants to request to speak, everybody's welcome to request to speak and say their piece. So go ahead.
Do you want to get Grant up here for a second?
Um,
Give him a
no,
second chance.
he's just. I mean, the only thing I really ask for people to have is to be genuine, and I just don't think he's a genuine guy. So that's fine. Let's move on to. Is there anything else you want to talk about on MicroStrategy?
Well, I just wanted to clarify
Sorry,
one thing, and that's
Tesla.
why I was. I just wanted to clarify one thing, and that's why I wanted to request maybe Grant to come up. Grant had his space. I think it was Friday night, a Tesla Q space, and I was listening to it. I like hearing perspectives from both sides. It doesn't hurt. It gives you information actually for a better decision. So I was listening into it, and I requested him to speak, but maybe he didn't see me or he didn't want me to speak. But there was a speaker that he had on there. I think Simon something. This guy was a wealth manager out of Canada. Okay. And I just wanted to highlight this point because this wealth manager out of Canada was talking about how many billions of dollars that he manages and how he was the ultra bull on Tesla and everything. Okay. And now you've got 100 people listening to somebody like that and not getting the entire picture. Okay. And while I'm in the same business, okay, but I just want to clarify a few points because some people speak to their position and I think they do more harm than good. And this guy himself, he said that he's not looking for clients, this, that, and everything. Okay. No, he is looking for clients, first of all, because his profile has his website on there. Okay. I nowhere disclose that I'm a wealth manager. Okay. Because that's not what I'm looking for. Okay. But that's exactly what this guy was looking for. Secondly, he said that he's got 35 billion in assets under management. Okay. And he kept referring to it as we manage 35 billion. He does not manage 35 billion. Okay. The entire independent RIA that he's a part of manages 35 billion. Under that RIA, there's about 100 advisors. He's just one independent advisor under that umbrella. Okay. So you can divide up the assets accordingly under that. And then if you look at it, and you can go see this all on his website itself. Okay. This is not stuff that I'm making up or anything. He's a portfolio manager. Okay. That sounds like a really fancy title, but any advisor who registers for discretionary trading basically can get that title. Then there was a title such as senior portfolio manager, which some people in that wealth group had, which only means that doesn't mean that that guy is smarter than the portfolio manager. That only means that he has more assets under management than the regular portfolio manager. That's it. So this guy is just a regular portfolio manager, and he's talking like he's managing $35 billion himself, and he's talking about his 10%, 15% position in Tesla, which none of that is true, and it just paints a bad picture. So that's my only thing. Okay, I'm positive on Tesla. I love the company. I own it, but I just want people to be a little bit more realistic that, you can love a product, you can love a company, but you don't have to love the stock always.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I agree with everything you said. Yeah. Yeah, looks like you and I agree on Tesla, on FSD tracker, where the actual miles of disengagement are on FSD, and also V13 expectations. Is there anything else you want to discuss on Tesla? There were some pictures taken from a drone shot of maybe new vehicles coming out of Fremont. Any thoughts on that?
I saw that. I didn't really look into it much, but I saw one of the replies. I kind of wanted to do a still and look at the details of it, but I don't think either one of them were cybercasts because all of them had side mirrors, and then it looked like a bag of different cars, like a mix of different cars. I think one was like a Model 3 and a Model S, so I don't think it was either not Juniper or anything either. So I didn't really make much of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be anything, right? There's a lot of speculation and rumors, but it could be old vehicles. It could be maybe one new vehicle. But in any case, I think the fact remains that the economy is challenging right now for any automaker. Interest rates are still high. They're expected to decline throughout the next year, but that's TBD. And how fast they will decline is also TBD. And the affordability of capital goods, large ticket items like homes and cars, is still pretty challenged. That can change though. That can change in time. In any case, I think more affordable vehicles will probably have even lower margins than um, what the Model Y commands today. And any sort of more affordable vehicle is probably going to cannibalize the existing models, just like Model 3 cannibalized Model S, Model Y cannibalized Model X, and the new Model 3 cannibalized some Model Y demand as well. So my guess is it's probably the new Model Y. Anyway, um, any thoughts on Optimus in Japan rumors or ads announcements?
I did not see that.
Yeah, there was a tweet with, I think in Japan they introduced maybe Optimus in the stores. So that's my guess. But these are just rumors, obviously.
Yeah, I think, it seems like a road show with Optimus, the Kim Kardashian pictures and video and stuff. It seems like a promotion, right? I mean, she didn't go somewhere and run into Optimus. I mean, Tesla basically did that for her. So uh, I think it's all of that. But I would actually love to talk to Machine next time when he's on here, about specific machine learning and inference, with the Optimus. This is what I've been thinking, that if for a car where certain objects are fixed, most of the surroundings are all fixed surroundings for a car, right? You have variable moving cars, of course, that you have to adjust to, but your sidewalk, your road, your curbs, lane indicators, white lines, yellow lines, all those are fixed. So it's a little bit easier. Now, if you have a robot, okay, which is going on vision only, and it has to learn to process inference based on eyes up on top and maybe a few other cameras here and there, but you're interacting with so many objects that are also moving, and objects that are infinite almost, give it any household and so on forth, to the minutest details and everything, right? I'm not saying that that's not possible, but that will if it's taking so much time to train FSD for 100% reliability, how much training will that take for an Optimus based on a vision platform to train?
Yeah, I think I honestly have a different view on Optimus. I guess we disagree on that part. I think it'll be easier in some respects to train Optimus because when you make a mistake with a car, with FSD on a car, then the probability of death and serious injury or very significant material damage is high. And with Optimus, maybe all that happens is just it falls and you have to replace hand or something. Um, and so you can have thousands of Optimus in the factory setting, each making various mistakes, and the entire fleet learning from each one's mistakes in a way that humans can't really learn as efficiently from each other. So I think the training will probably be easier. I think the difficult, like training of new capabilities, I think will be easier with Optimus. Um, but I think that getting to the reliability level needed for it to be shipped out, I think is going to be just as difficult as FSD. So um, I think they're still going to need tens of billions of dollars of investment to improve FSD and Optimus. I think Tesla will still go in a kind of staged, careful, controlled manner in terms of production. Maybe ramp a couple thousand, a few hundred, then redesign, ramp a couple thousand, see how the market accepts it. There's a lot of unknown risks that they're going to want to be careful about. And more, I think, on the other hand, I think more importantly for Optimus project, the number of companies trying to do the same thing is very high. I think it's going to be order of magnitude more than EVs. So I think the market will be a lot more challenged on the demand side. Go ahead, Aces.
I agree. So do you think that something that we had talked about before, that the initial application and probably the wider application will be in an industrial setting, and it'll take many, many years for it to be a household or a more mass produced setting?
Yeah, I think Tesla will train in its factories, but I think the end user, they're not going to go stage by like if Amazon wants to buy a bunch of Optimus or a household wants to buy Optimus, I don't think Tesla will differentiate between those two. I think Tesla will sell it to whoever wants to buy it. And just like on the vehicle side, Tesla doesn't really have like a separate fleet business. Hertz needed to wait in line, pay the same price, etc. I think it's going to be industrial versus household use is going to be about the same timeline, I think. What specific question do you have for Machine that I can relate to him if and when he joins when you're not here?
I guess I'm just trying to understand the learning process, the technical aspect of the learning process of how it is implemented for FSD and how it'll play out for an Optimus. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And based on that, possibly, have a better timeline around a fully rolled out Optimus.
Yeah, so Machine first has a view that Optimus will be able to generate $1 billion of profits before robotaxis. And separate from his view, I think I agree with him, first of all, on that one. And separately, I think the training process is going to be 90% the same. So you still have cameras only. And so it's end-to-end neural networks. Also, the fact that Tesla has an in-house team that is very experienced developing FSD, improving FSD, is pretty much going to be the same team. And the training GPUs and the data centers used to train either one, FSD or Optimus, is going to be pretty much the same. So I would guess that 90% of the training process will be the same. And that's like I'm trying to be conservative because I actually don't know of any way that they differ.
Well, in your comparison to FSD, though, like you said, that it sells the same car and the same FSD no matter who wants to use it, but that's because everybody uses it in the same setting, which is roads, which by and large are governed by the same rules and are structured the same way. But an Optimist, what you may want to use it at home or Tesla may be using in their own factory, could be completely different from how Amazon wants to use it in their factory.
But you can make the same argument with parking lots or highway or city driving or country to country or state by state. They differ too a little bit, and it's all the same model, right?
Correct, but it's the same parameters of same roads, same structure, and everything, right? Like if FSD is on an assembly line working and moving objects from one place to the other, maybe grouping objects, placing them, bolting them, whatever, versus somebody who wants to use it at home to knit a sweater. It's completely two different skill set. And I'm just using, extreme skill set, but it could be of varying skill sets, right? So all of that would have to be incorporated into the infinite, I guess, if you're going to just roll it out to one solution to everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I took the note of your question, and if he joins, I'll ask him. And you can also ask Wes. Would be a good person to ask. His handle is Tesla Trip, and you can ask Meta at a Meta 4, or you can ask Omar. Like, if you just reply to any one of those, they'll respond to you. So okay, and then when he comes here, I'll ask him live as well, and I'll think about it separately. You want to talk some MicroStrategy?
How about MicroStrategy?
Yeah, this is a really interesting case. Are you short?
No, so once again, I don't short any individual stocks. Rarely I will take an inverse short position by using an leveraged ETF, and that's rare.
Yeah, and when you have leveraged ETF, do you just hold it there short term kind of thing?
Yes, if I hold it for a week, then it's usually that I held it too long.
Yeah, I think MicroStrategy might be the best short opportunity right now. There's a bunch of short opportunities. There's a lot of short opportunities actually, I think today, but I think MicroStrategy might be the best one for the reasons at the top. Do you agree with all 4 points pinned at the top?
I agree with that. It has the best short potential. In fact, on Friday when you were asking which one should I cover out of my short positions the first, it would be the last one. I mean, it boggles my mind as to what it is or how it's able to carry the valuation. I was listening to another space, and actually Grant Cardone was on that space, listening to a bunch of bulls, MicroStrategy bulls, and they basically were challenging people to convince them otherwise. And this was Friday night, and I'm like, this has to be the top. I mean, some of the stuff that I'm hearing here, I'm like, this is absurd. In fact, one of the MicroStrategy bulls himself started calling it's like it a Ponzi scheme, and then that this is the best Ponzi scheme. And the other guys that did intervene and say, oh, just don't use that word, okay? It's kind of like that, but just don't use that word.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Some of the narrative in the MicroStrategy community is really interesting. Of course, there's a huge risk here. This is a very levered play. It's a fast-moving, high volatility play. There are various ways of shorting it. You can short the stock straight. You can buy puts. You can write calls. You can buy levered ETFs that short it. They all have their pros and cons. And like sometimes I'll hear in the replies that you're crazy. Like you can buy puts, but you're crazy if you short it straight. Well, I think that's kind of like you're missing half the picture there. They all have their risks and pros and cons. Every single instrument does. So it's very situation dependent too. Like for a stock that had a very high short interest, maybe short squeeze possibility is higher, and you may want to go with a put in that case. But if the short interest is low, you may want to go with a straight stock short. And then also your portfolio weightings matter as well. Like I listed 7, 8 stocks that I've shorted, and they all have different weights. They all have different position sizes. But I think MicroStrategy, like you said, has a better risk return profile on the short side. And I see Wes in the crowd. If he wants to come up on the speaker, we have a quick question for him about FSD versus Optimus training. While Wes does that, I'm going to read a quick thank you to our sponsor. And if you're listening, watching on YouTube, please take a moment to hit the like button. All right. Tesla Live is proudly sponsored by Paymore, your trusted destination for buying, selling, trading, and recycling electronics. Looking to upgrade your tech? Want to turn your old device into cash? With over 100 stores nationwide, Paymore makes it easy and secure. They believe that the best technology doesn't have to come at the cost of our planet or your wallet. Thank you, Paymore, for supporting Tesla Live and making technology accessible and sustainable for everyone. All right. Wes, welcome. How are you? Wes, you're on mute.
Oh boy,
Wes?
mic is on.
Yeah, okay, I hear you now.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
that's okay. So ACDC was asking earlier, um, how does the training process for FSD versus Optimus differ?
Oh, good question. Obviously, they're operating in different scenarios, like completely. It's more or less a kind of a 3D world rather than a 2D world, if you will. So you're training when you stitch all the images together for training on the vehicle. You're kind of creating a flat world, if you will. Obviously, it's a X, Y, and Z axis, but it's only rolling. So you're only dealing with that kind of flat plane. Whereas Optimus, you're dealing with a true 3D environment. So you're going to want to have a different kind of training corpus, if you will. So the process might be the same as if you take kind of pixels in, and then you output controls and planning. But I think it is kind of fundamentally different when you think about the true 3D inputs, because you're operating in this 3D world where you're doing what I would consider pretty rough movements, which is kind of the bipedal motion, and then you're doing extremely fine movements, which is like literally threading a needle, which Elon has talked about specifically. And I would find that these would kind of offer up very different training sets. To do these, it's a much more high dynamic range. Creates an ecosystem of learning rather than like just a straight set of like, well, here's an example of a road, and an action that I took on this road segment. Whereas like sometimes with the needle you want to thread it, and sometimes you want to sew with it, sometimes you want to organize it, sometimes you want to pick it up, and sometimes you might want to walk with it and throw it away. And these could all be like varying degrees of really fine controlled movement to very rough movement. So I would start to think about more of a larger corpus of training different models. So that's kind of like the beginning of my answer. It's a big question.
Thank you. ACDC, does that answer your question? And do you have any follow-up questions?
It does. So I think it kind of confirms it. This whole question came to my mind. Like I personally have not. I mean, I know you talked about Optimus quite a bit. I haven't really weighed heavily into it because I don't personally see it as a big addition to the bottom line anytime soon. But on the 1010 event, when the Optimus was standing there and handing out goodie bags out of a tray, it was picking one up and then handing it out and so on forth. And then when the tray was empty, they would replenish it with another tray. If you look closely, that tray had the goodie bags aligned in a specific row with a specific distance from each other. It had to be very precise, and it was placed at that exact same place. Okay, so Optimus doesn't even have the capacity of just picking up random objects, just and handing it to people right now. So it requires that training. So that's exactly kind of like my question. And my follow-up would be that in your estimation, Wes, knowing that how long it's taken and how long it will continue to take for FSD to be perfected, such infinite training scenarios for Optimus, do you have an estimate as like how much longer it could take and relative to FSD?
Wes?
So I had to drop off and come back because it just went silent on me. So I missed part of that. If you could repeat it.
How do you think the timeline for FSD versus Optimus training compare?
Oh yeah, maybe just at a really high level, I feel like you got to train the brain for FSD first. We have to understand what it takes to solve kind of this 2D rolling environment, and how much kind of training that's going to take, and what kind of process solves that, so you can learn from it. I really think the bipedal movement is a huge space to solve. Just walking in an environment, I've talked about this many times, but I feel like that is a solution in and of its own that might require something vastly different. So I think that training time is kind of like my foundation. And I feel like that in and of itself could present a myriad of problems on how the bot balances and what it does to catch itself, and when it falls, how it falls, and which way it falls into. It's kind of like that canonical example in autonomous driving of you have two choices. One, you hit a pedestrian, and the other one, you hit a car. Like, what do you do? And this is a lesser of two evils. They kind of have to solve that problem too, for how the bot is going to fall, because it's going to fall. There's going to be situations where it has to, and how it handles that prediction, and how it kind of reduces crash energy and all that. So I do think that timeline is also extended, because they kind of have to solve the 2D rolling example first, and then the 3D. I know they're, obviously they're already trying to solve that, but that's going to have to fit within this other paradigm, most likely, that they solve the 2D rolling problem with, because that will help them accelerate.
Wes, you're cutting off a little bit. I think the ACDC, is he cutting off for you too?
Yeah, he was towards the end.
Yeah. All right. I asked ChatGPT as well, ACDC, your question. How does FSD and Optimus training differ? So here's what it said. Tesla's full self-driving system and its humanoid robot, Optimus, both rely on advanced AI, but their training processes differ due to their distinct operational environments and objectives. FSD data collection. Tesla's extensive fleet of vehicles continues to collect real-world data, including video footage and sensor readings. This data is crucial for training and refining the FSD system. Sorry, I'm going to continue, but Wes, go ahead.
Sorry, I just turned off my Bluetooth headset because I don't think it's working. So keep going.
Yeah, this is
Just want to
so
let you
much
know.
better. Yeah, thank you. This is so much better. All right. Neural network training for FSD. The collected data is processed using Tesla's supercomputer Dojo, which is designed to handle vast amounts of video data. Dojo trains neural networks to interpret. I guess that's wrong, right? Because Tesla also uses NVIDIA GPUs, or mostly uses NVIDIA GPUs, really. All right, so Optimus robot training, motion capture data collection. To train Optimus, Tesla employs individuals wear motion capture suits and virtual reality headsets. These operators perform specific tasks, and their movements are recorded to create data sets. Neural network training is the same for both. And for FSD, simulation and validation. Before deployment, the trained models are tested in simulated environments to ensure safety and reliability. This helps identify and address potential issues without real-world risks. For Optimus, real-world testing, trained robots are deployed in control settings. Key differences. 1, data sources. FSD training relies on data from Tesla's vehicle fleet. In contrast, Optimus training data is generated through human-performed tasks in motion capture setups. 2, training objectives. FSD aims to navigate complex driving environments autonomously. Optimus focuses on replicating human movements to perform tasks like object manipulation and navigation within structured environments. 3, deployment environments. FSD operates in dynamic, unpredictable road conditions, necessitating robust decision-making algorithms. Optimus is designed for more controlled settings, such as manufacturing facilities, where tasks are repetitive and environments are structured. Wes, how would you? I think this is a kind of mildly okay response. It's not great. What do you think?
It's an interesting way to kind of think about it. It mostly sounds like kind of the way that I'm thinking. So I don't think it's way off.
Okay. And then this is one of those responses. ChatGPT asks to pick one of the two responses, and there's a whole other response as well. environment complexity. FSD deals with high variability and unpredictability, whereas Optimus often works in controlled environments. Response time, FSD requires millisecond level decision making, while Optimus can afford. So, Wes, do you think Tesla will develop a another inference computer for Optimus, or do you think they're going to use the latest FSD computer?
I would think that the one that they currently have has enough TOPS or compute power per cycle to handle the specific environments. I don't see why that would be not enough. You could argue that maybe it's, just to be clear, like you could argue that it might need a significant more amount of memory because it's a 3D space. But I think if they're smart about how they're feeding in data, like the input pixels and maybe other sensors into the models, that they can be more efficient with the amount of compute that they have in memory.
Yeah, you exactly answered my next question. If you were to design an inference computer for Optimus specifically, how would you? What would you increase? What would you decrease? So I guess you said increase memory because it's a 3D environment.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a while back, but video games do this thing called depth of detail. And as you get further away from something, you don't need as much detail. And as you get closer, you need more detail. And the cameras can pick this up with different lenses. So like as the bot gets closer to things and it has a lens, more like a macro lens type of a thing, and it can see in great detail for tiny things and have very fine-tuned movements, that could potentially be a different model. So it's not like you have to have one model running all the time. While it's standing doing these fine-tuned movements, it can more focus on this like fine-tuned depth of detail model. And when it's walking and it's not trying to thread a needle at the same time, then the inference computer is just focused on the walking task. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. AC/DC?
So kind of in continuation to that, I had a question. Currently, the way the cars use the front vision camera is that they can do proximity sensing, but it has been shown in various different testing videos on X that if an object is below the bumper height, FSD will often not, or just the car itself will not often recognize it, and it'll hit that object, right? So because of the memory part, in part maybe because the object moved into it afterwards, it can happen. So if are we using the same vision-based process for an Optimus with cameras really up in the eyes, maybe some at the waist, or does that Optimus also have proximity sensors like within hands and feet and more so around the body?
Yeah, good question. The thing that I've seen so far is that it definitely has vision at the head, and then it has touch sensors in the fingers. I would also think that it has some type of articulation sensor, so like feedback in the joints. So it knows that, like if its foot is stuck, there's too much force that's required to move the foot to walk, that it would know to kind of sense that, this resistance, if you will, and then, like look down and say, oh yeah, like something's stuck to my foot. Like there's a kid that's like, I'm dragging it with my foot, that type of thing. Like a parent would do. I don't think that there's other sensors like I don't think it has radar or LiDAR, for instance. I don't think it requires that. I think vision is good enough. It's not moving at a really fast pace to require some type of more like instantaneous 3D awareness like that. So I don't think that's necessary, and I don't think radar is necessary for a depth of field. You can get that structure from motion from vision. That's kind of a well-known solution now. It's not that hard to calculate. So I don't think you need any more sensors. And that obviously you need an accelerometer, potentially a gyroscope. And we're talking like definitely a 3-axis, but maybe a couple different, because those are really cheap sensors. You might want a couple for redundancy, to check kind of like the balance of your lower versus your upper, that type of thing, so that you can always remain in like incredible balanced state. Because obviously, I think my vision is that the bot falling over is the worst possible thing that can happen. Because then you can crush a soft, delicate, fragile object. Like a human, like a tiny human type thing. There you go.
Thank you, Wes. Any other questions for Optimus, for Wes on Optimus or FSD? You're welcome to request to speak. Wes, what do you make of Elon's tweet that V13 is tracking approximately 500% better?
It's a good number. I've just learned to completely discount what he says and just wait. The proof is in the pudding. Let's see what the build actually does when it comes out. Because while it might be tracking to a high amount of reliability in a test fleet, when it comes out, they have to put more restrictions on it and more safety critical controls, and that may unfortunately reduce the reliability because it has to just be safer, and it does more things that might be considered not good for the driving experience for us humans. We might feel the need to take over, or it might actually have more false negatives and it might miss things. This is what happens when you put restrictions on AI models. They tend to do odd things.
Yeah. And he said in the past that it's getting more difficult with each version as the miles per critical disengagement increases. It's getting more difficult to test and validate. So do you think he has, what data do you think he's relying on when he says V13 is tracking for 500% better, since it's not even out in the wild yet?
Right. They have a telemetry pipeline that plumbs up to a dashboard, and he can see the dashboard. We had that, similar things at SpaceX, which I had a hand in building lots of those. So I feel like that's more than likely what he has, because I know that they like that type of thing, and they want the whole team to be focused on that. So this is like the largest thing that they're focused on. This is like their top level KPI, their top level performance metric is, necessary interventions, per minute or per mile. They have a telemetry pipeline that bubbles that up. So as they test this in the fleet, all the engineers, they dog food their own builds. So they drive it home, drive it to work. And then there's most likely they still have the private fleet, the professional test drivers that I set up a long time ago. I'm sure they still have something along the lines of that. And that is like, essentially the closest thing you can get to ground truth. So I would assume that he's seeing these numbers from there. It may also be a simulation number, because they do have a pretty robust simulation environment. So he might just be quoting that as well. But I would hope that he's looking at something more real world. It's funny that he's been so far off in the past. So I unfortunately have to discount, kind of the things that he says until it's out in the wild.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions for Wes? Please request to speak. I had one more question for you, but I can't remember now. It's all right. Do you have any? I don't think you and I have discussed the recent debate about. Here's the question I want to ask you. So I don't know if I remember your view on. So Machine has said Optimus will get to 1 billion in profits before robotaxis. Did you take a side on that yet?
It's interesting. I would feel differently. I think that FSD will, because I do think they have to solve the 2D rolling process and solution first. And as soon as they do, that's going to elicit a huge amount of profit. So I do think that that'll happen first. I think the walking solution is harder than the rolling solution.
Interesting. So when you say 2D, you're obviously not referring to object detection. You're talking about more about planning and
Right.
controls, right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly correct. Yep.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So does the fact that planning and controls for Optimus is a 3D problem, whereas FSD is a 2D problem, does that mean you're going to need more compute to train the brain for Optimus?
Yeah, it might, but I still think, like I was saying earlier, I think you can break that down into separate models so that you can run these separate models at different times. I also think that it's much easier to add memory to the bot versus the vehicles, because like you haven't made them yet, and you can easily just add that memory in because you haven't made millions of bots yet. So I think that they can scale, they can figure out what works best there, and also like it's standing as opposed to like moving great distances. So that efficiency of adding a little bit more weight, for because memory is super light, it's not that big of a problem. And then it doesn't have to be in like this tight critical control safety loop. So like the bot can just like stand, run that model, and then start to walk. Maybe it's a different model for walking, and I'm not kidding. Like that's what I would do. I'd try to optimize the walking model, and then I would potentially even have a control loop for an unbalanced model. So somebody comes and pushes it, and then it has to calculate like, do I need to brace for falling, or can I catch myself? And like, what does my environment look like when I'm going through this process? So I think all of these models could potentially be different. Thus, I don't think you need more compute, because you could run these models separately. One can take over from the other, because you don't have to do all these things simultaneously. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you, Luce. And then I have two more questions for Wes.
Yeah. So, Wes, do you think Optimus is overrated for industries? Let me explain. So, do you think Optimus will be popular in industries when somebody can just make a specialized robot for whatever it's they need to? For example, do you think Optimus will be used in industries for jobs that humans do now, or there will be more specialized robots that are not humanoids?
No, I understand the question. So maybe I'd frame it in a different way. I'd say I would just work my way from easiest to hardest. So the easiest job to kind of do for a robot that humans used to do, and this is already like really being seen in Amazon warehouses. Like most Amazon warehouses now are near completely autonomous, where humans don't do very, very meaning. I was going to say like super redundant tasks that are easy for a robot to do. They definitely don't do those. But like when they have to handle like damage control, like one of the boxes falls or something's broken inside, or like if you shake this one bot, like you can hear that there's pieces of glass in there. You don't want to ship that, for quality control. Like these are things that I don't think bots are doing yet, that maybe a human is still doing. But eventually all of these tasks will be taken over by bots, and the reason is because like humans are expensive, and also these kind of repetitive tasks that's hard for a human to do, and they just won't have as high as quality. So the value calculation over time greatly benefits the robot. So I do feel like all of these tasks will be taken over by a bot. And then you can start to see that maybe this whole process in and of itself that was designed for humans, you would start to redesign these processes just so bots can do them. And I see that coming as well. So I don't feel like humans have to be involved in these kind of highly redundant, boring tasks that they're just not well suited for. They're much more well suited to do kind of these higher level like knowledge or wisdom type jobs that require that. So there you go. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Wes. Any other questions for Wes? Please request to speak or let me know in live chat. Wes, what do you think about the post at the top? This job posting just came out, and Tesla bulls are getting excited that it says teleoperation. When you look at this post, what crosses your mind?
Yeah, I read that over the weekend, and it it gives me hope that they'll do teleoperation for the beginning of a robotaxi fleet. But this is also for teleoperation of the bot, which we know that they're already doing, because that was demonstrated at the event. My thought is that that is highly leveraged between the two. So you do it for the robot. The car also can do that because it's more of like a controls, safety critical process, remote process that you would set up inside of the autopilot computer. So I feel like that those two roles would be highly leveraged. So you'd probably want just one team creating that process, because this authentication process would be a huge attack surface that you would want to be sure was very tightly controlled.
Thank you. Do you think FSD 13 will be sufficient enough for unsupervised driving?
So it sounds like they're going to be feature complete per Ashok's tweet or post. So I feel like if they get to feature complete, then the next thing is to scale reliability. And just for folks, just to be sure, like feature complete is obvious for me, but in the software industry, it basically just means like the way that they function, when they function correctly, that's how they want them to function. And you just need to increase reliability after that. It isn't like, they're going to add new features later on. Like, for instance, every sign would be supported. That's my understanding of feature complete. So I do believe that they feel like they can scale, and I think they can. One of the reasons is that over time, you see like the same model reliability and functionality over time can be used on a much, much smaller compute and memory surface. And we see this with, like the original ChatGPT models that were released. Now then these can be run on, 10,000 times less compute, and in some instances, like, 1 million times less memory, with the way that we can optimize models in inference runtime. So over time, these models just become much, much easier to run with the same amount of reliability. And that's what they'll focus on once they get to feature complete, because you don't have to worry about building new features. You can just focus on performance and efficiency. So there you go.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Please request to speak. Wes, any other thoughts on FSD, Optimus? FSD community tracker is in front stage again. People are debating its reliability. So Omar just responded to my coffee bet proposal. I don't think he took the coffee bet, but he said the problem with this bet is that they said 6x improvement for the fleet, not 6x improvement for a number of individuals. So, and I responded to it with, I think the sample size, as far as I'm concerned, is large enough and diverse enough to give us some signal. Maybe not perfect, but I also don't think people should dismiss it. What are your thoughts on FSD tracker?
Yeah, one of the things that I think of when I think of FSD trackers, I think of Kaz, Cyberlift. I've watched a ton of his videos, and I absolutely love the way he collects data. And I think he does a really good job at trying to remove biases as much as possible. Obviously, he could be at the middle of the bell curve, or potentially at the high end. And I could definitely be not in the middle of the bell curve. I could definitely be on one end. So biases are a big deal, and that's when you create your telemetry pipeline, you try to remove as much of those as you can and look at things in the larger aggregate. I think that FSD tracker is good though, but it is what it is. It is not a true statistical database. It's close, I would say, but what Tesla has is going to be obviously bigger. So I do feel like the people that post data there are probably very much enthusiasts. So that could introduce bias. I just want to be sure that when we look at that data, that we also pair it with our own experiences in our own area, and then you can kind of draw conclusions from that. But I think it is the best thing that we have to like a true telemetry pipeline kind of like dashboard look at how FSD is doing.
Yeah, exactly. I agree 100%. Thank you. And I think ACDC agrees 100% as well. We talked about this topic before you joined, and ACDC agree 100% on this topic as well. Luce?
Yeah, well, I wanted to to say mine about the feature complete comment. As Wes said, in my opinion, it's not feature complete as long as they don't recognize signals. I don't understand how they think it's feature complete. That's all.
They don't recognize what?
Signals. Signals.
Signals. Recognize signals. What signals?
Yeah, well, for example, the stop sign, it's a signal, right?
It does recognize stop signs.
Yeah, but not all of them. So I don't understand how can
And
be
that's not
feature complete.
okay. I'll let Wes explain himself, but yeah, I think you have a different definition of feature complete here. Wes?
Yeah, I do know, for instance, we lost power for several days in Seattle, and it does not handle with any form of high reliability stoplights that are out, like not working and completely dark. Sometimes it did the right thing, and other times it blew right through them or tried to. So I had to do an immediate takeover before that happened. And it's not like humans do a good job at this. We actually saw a really bad accident where somebody just blew through a dark stoplight and T-boned somebody. So this is definitely not feature complete yet. Ashoka said that, and to be feature complete, it needs to support these different types of signals. So one type is a traffic light that is dark, that is non-operational. Another type is when it's blinking yellow or blinking red, and it needs to handle these appropriately, or it's going to get hit by a human most likely, because the human knows generally how to handle those. It also doesn't handle active school zones in my area. I have to take over every single time. I drive through nearly 8 of those every single day, depending on the route that I take to get my kids both to and from. And it doesn't handle the stop sign that comes out from a school bus with any type of reliability. So these are the things that it needs to do to be feature complete in my mind. So there's my little extra definition.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, like I think that they probably have tested how FSD would handle school zones. They probably have data on handling school zones or emergency vehicles or a cop with its hand movements, etc. It's just that those are things that you have to be very close to 100% accuracy, if not 100% accurate, to be able to roll out to a wide fleet. And I think they're going to just wait until the accuracy improves on those features to roll them out. But yeah, they're getting close to feature complete. But, all right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just to be clear, like Ashok said, that they were aiming for that with V13, and that's not in the first release, I would almost guarantee. But also on the flip side, remember that all these features potentially could make the model a lot bigger. And they may be struggling with, trying to fit all this on hardware 4. So that could be a possible thing. I don't rule that out, but that could be a possible deal. And I'm going to have to peace out in a few minutes, just FYI.
Okay. Sounds good. And then, yeah, that sounds good. I don't have any other questions for you. Anybody has questions for Wes? Wes, thank you so much for coming and answering these questions. I mean, without you, we wouldn't be able to do a great job on this topic. So it's good to have you on the speaker board. Any other questions? If not, we're going to switch topics. All right, ACDC, I multiplied by my GM short position by 10 times. I believe it was last week I did that. But GM stock has increased by 120% in the last 1 year period. And it goes up pretty rapidly. Even today, it's up 4.5% now. The stock is trading at 6.5 PE ratio, $67 billion market cap. I suspect some of this is due to the Trump administration looking to freeze emissions regulations so that they don't get more stringent in the coming years. I believe that's part of it. And then there's another part of it is that GM spends a lot of money buying back its stock. The dividend yield is very small, but that's how they return capital to investors, by buying back stock. ACDC, do you think GM is worth $67 billion of market cap?
I mean, if you look at it right now, if you compare it to a Ford, I think it's kind of there. I mean, they're very similar in terms of their valuation. So I think it can sustain itself among the industry group. I don't think anything sticks out per se on GM itself versus all other traditional automakers. So I honestly think that it could probably hang here and do what the industry does.
Well, so GM has $67 billion market cap. Ford has 45. GM has increased by 120% in the last year. Ford has increased 10%. Ford has a 5% dividend yield. GM is buying back stock. Ford is going to benefit from the freezing of the emission standards as much as GM. They have similar international operations. Both of the companies' profits come from US, and most of large size vehicles. Ford primarily from F-150, GM primarily from its large size SUVs. Can you think of any other differences between the two companies? The ownership structure is a little different, but really not that much. What do you think?
I think it's pretty much what you said. So when you put that on a post, I was kind of surprised myself. I guess GM has been off my radar, and I didn't realize that how much of an appreciation it's had. And the only thing I can contribute it to is the buyback, and hence the 5% difference in the dividend payout, because on a forward PE, they're both literally the same, around 6 PE. And the only way GM has been increasing their earnings is by buying back stock.
Okay, great. Glad we're on the same page on that one. I see Machine in the crowd. ACD had a question for Machine earlier. If Machine can come up to speaker board, we can also ask him the same question that we just asked Wes, and we can also discuss other topics as well. While Machine does that, ACDC, one of our sponsors of Tesla Live, an anonymous sponsor, asked me to ask one person what their best or favorite Elon Musk quote is. What's your favorite Elon Musk quote, ACDC?
Make more babies.
Make more babies. All right. On that note, Machine, welcome. Machine has a bunch of babies. Machine, the question for you is, how does FSD training process differ from Optimus training process? That's one. Second question, do you still believe Optimus will generate the first $1 billion in profits before robotaxis?
So I think the training process is different. Number one, that FSD is primarily trained on labeled data, mostly real world data and some simulation data, and as a simple supervised task, which is don't hit things, and send that back into the algorithm with lots of real training data and improve the strategy to do that. And I know I'm simplifying it here, but for Optimus, the goals are much more unclear in terms of what objectively is the robot trying to do for a given task. Number one, all these tasks are different. It's not like there's one total task for all robots to follow that you train on. You're going to train some to reach and pick up an object. So what are you going to label as the goal? The goal is to pick up object. How do you label that in a training set? It's not actually straightforward. And then you have all sorts of different tasks. And so, yeah, part of those cost functions are going to be things like don't fall over, don't break things. Those could be robust and spread across all the different tasks. But each task itself has its own goal that they have to kind of prescribe. And the problem is On top of that, they don't have a lot of real world data. So they're going to have to do a lot of simulation to do the training, pre-training, let's say, for this, and then try to get some robots in the real world testing these things out and collecting further data. But they're much weaker in that position than an FSD.
Okay, thank you. ACDC, any other follow-up questions for Machine? Go ahead.
So in that case, wouldn't that contradict your bet that actually FSD would make the $1 billion revenue first?
Well, yeah, on that point, I would say the training aspect is definitely an advantage to FSD, but that's not the only factor. The main factor and benefit toward Optimus is simply that these tasks, some of the tasks are much simpler to achieve a high enough reliability to deploy. Number one, because the reliability doesn't have to be as high as FSD. And number two, because you can modularize which tasks are actually good enough to deploy, like some robot sitting in front of a McDonald's just scooping fries. It won't be that hard to collect enough data to get that to work, and then you can all of a sudden replace thousands, 10,000, 100,000s. I don't know how many employees in McDonald's worldwide with this one cheap trick, right? It's like that meme, just this one cheap trick, and you can replace all these workers. And even though it doesn't have much data, so that's kind of the give and take, is that's just simply much simpler, even though it has less data. So in terms of that bet, I honestly haven't evaluated lately where everything is sitting. I don't see FSD making unsupervised money any sooner than I did a few years ago. At the same time, Optimus is probably taking longer than I, optimistically hope for. So the bet is probably weaker than I thought before. And my last thing, just on favorite Elon Musk quote, for sure, is Elon Musk saying, based on current trends, the number of COVID cases will be 0 by April 2020. That's one of the worst ones.
Okay. Machine, what do you think about the coffee bet? Would you like to take the coffee bet I proposed at the top? So Elon tweeted, V13 is tracking to be approximately 500% better. And so I looked at the FSD tracker and picked what I believe is going to be most important on the path to robotaxi deployment is the city miles to critical disengagement, which FSD tracker currently shows 98. So I said, bet V13 will be less than 500 city miles to disengagement. What do you think?
No, there's no way I'm taking the other side of that bet. I mean, I've been burned many times by actually trying to listen to his words, even though I've known many times that his words you can't take literally. I mean, I've been around following this company for 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for sending that $5 for my coffee. I really appreciate it. Really, the coffee tastes better when it's free. I really appreciate that. And you also had predicted SMCI was going to hit an all-time high before they announced some accounting irregularities that tanked the stock. And I think you sent that $5 too. So thank you very much. Would you like to make more coffee bets? I need more coffee.
First of all, we know, and you know, true in your heart, that you've lost many coffee bets to me and have never paid up. And I'm not going to ask for that money because I know you're homeless, living in a box, and don't hold any Tesla shares, according to Twitter.
I'm short. I mean, I don't know what do people need to realize that short means short.
Have you posted your account?
No, I'm not gonna do that.
Are you net short?
Net short.
How many? Okay. Do you own Tesla shares still?
I'm not going to answer any further questions. I am short. Like, I don't know what else you need to.
Is your delta? Your delta is negative.
Yeah. You are. Do you? The everything is negative, man. I am short. Okay. And I have.
That's also what your wife said.
I've disclosed a bunch of short positions, about 7-8 stocks, including Tesla, Nvidia, MicroStrategy, GME, Palantir, Rivian, Ford, and GM. And what I'm really curious about is why AI driver unfollowed me.
Hey, to be fair, you never followed me in the first place.
No, please, sir, please answer the question. Why did you unfollow me recently?
Oh, I just you talk about people flip-flopping. I think you did the biggest flip-flop I've ever seen in my life, and I was just sick of the drama on my feed. Like, it honestly, I rolled my eyes every single time, and my eyes were starting to see out of the back of my head, so I had to do something.
Okay, so by flip flop you mean what exactly?
The last time I was here, for example, you literally removed somebody off the speaker board while they were giving a real situation they experienced on full self-driving where they hit a cone on the freeway or something. Um, and it seems like I'm honestly kind of in the same boat as you. I want to know like what happened, man. Like from the last time I joined to now. I just hopped up here because you're saying you're short everything, and if you look at the history of people shorting things, even professionally, like it never really turns out well. Like, what happened from the last time I was here to now?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't remember that incident where I removed someone that you just mentioned. If you provide me with the exact clip you're talking about, I can explain what happened. Just because I care about your account, I benefit a lot from your YouTube channel and your posts. I think you're one of the
I got
top.
another one for you then. I got another one for you.
Okay, hold on. Let me just finish. When I'm hosting this space, especially when there are people with large followings and people I want to hear from, sometimes we get duplicate questions. Sometimes we get ingenuine questions. I don't know the specific case, but I'm sure there was a very good reason why I removed the person. And sometimes I got to do what I got to do as the host of the space. But go ahead.
Sure, I understand. So speaking of coffee bets, I think I have one coffee bet with you. I think it was made a little bit over a year ago when I said I didn't think a driverless ride was going to happen for at least the next couple of years. And you had a coffee bet with me that, full self-driving, or they would have one autonomous ride by the end of this year.
Okay, I'm
And
gonna
so it's
look it
like,
up.
yeah, I mean,
Gonna,
you can look at our
I'll look it up right
private
now.
messages, but it's like that's not the only coffee
Oh,
bet
is
you've
it
had with people.
DMs?
Like, but yeah, but how can you be so bullish on something? Like, you were more bullish on full self driving than me, which is crazy. How do you go from that to where you're at now?
Yeah. So let me just pull up this coffee bet. So all my coffee bets are published and people can easily find them. If you search for from Valley Analyst 1, and then the person with whom I have the coffee bet. So in this case, AI driver. And I don't see it, but you said DMs. So I'll go through our DMs and pull up the exact wording, because sometimes what happens is, people say we had a coffee bet, but we didn't. Or sometimes they remember the wording incorrectly. I'm not saying this is the case, but I have to see the exact coffee bet. So what happened, I mentioned before, I also posted about this too. Maybe if you didn't unfollow me, you might have seen this post. And now that's the question. But I learned a couple of things. One, let me see first. Just give me 1 second. Let me just find this and I'll pin it up here.
Yeah, I mean, I sent you a screenshot of it.
Okay.
It says you have a message to me saying coffee bet nationwide Tesla robotaxi service by 2025. But regardless, like, I'm not even interested in that. I mean, I'll take the coffee, but I'm more interested
Well,
in like how your perspective changed.
if it says by 2025, it's end of 2025. And I'll get to, no, I really
Are
care
you
about the
bullish
exact.
enough in full self-driving to think that an autonomous ride is going to happen in the next month?
Look, I'm not saying either way. Okay. But the thing is, like, that coffee, if there is a coffee bet, I'll check that DM that you just sent. Okay. And we'll settle it. But if that's the bet, that's the bet. Like, I'm not going to back out on my coffee bet. So here's 3 lessons I learned since 2019. Don't take management words at face value. So I'm a lot more critical of what I hear from managements in general and Tesla management. 2, this is the critical piece when it comes to FSD and robotaxis. It takes 10 times training time to have the error rate for an AI model. Okay, so this is the critical piece that I learned earlier this year when I watched an interview with Gavin Baker, who I respect. And he's obviously, this was a Fidelity management portfolio manager who was an early investor in Tesla. And I followed his interviews and his posts over time, over the last several years, who I believe is a very good investor. And now this is a general rule of thumb, and there is questions and debate about whether that applies to FSD and robotaxis. But I didn't know this general rule of thumb until early this year. Okay, and I did some analysis, back of the napkin analysis, when I looked at FSD tracker, previous statements, any sort of data I can find on FSD's reliability, and it seems to fit. That doesn't mean in the future it's going to continue to fit. Again, this is a general rule of thumb. But if this is true, then what that means is it's going to take several more years to get FSD from 1.9 of reliability to 6.9 of reliability that I believe is going to be needed for FSD unsupervised service and robotaxis. So that's the critical piece of information I learned early this year. And I posted the specific clip. I posted the YouTube link as well. But sometimes what happens is every single person wants an answer to the same question exactly when they ask it. They don't realize I've already answered the question a million times before. And that obviously is part of the reason why we have these spaces. So I'm glad that you decided to come up today and ask a question that I've already answered several times. And then the third point at the top is crossing the chasm is insanely difficult. As we just learned from EV adoption, Tesla's growth rate has dropped substantially despite the massive price cuts. And that's in part because of the success of hybrids around the world, not just in the US, but also in China, in Europe as well. And I learned some more about human psychology thanks to machine, buyer behavior, consumer behavior, how they decide with certain things. So I make mistakes and I learn from my mistakes.
I understand that. I just think that changing your investment thesis is a little different than just shorting everything in sight. I feel like it's almost like out of spite at this point. It's not
Okay,
just
so
Tesla,
when you
it's
say-
GM, but it's everything else
Okay.
too. Like if you're
So over the last, under the macro analyst account, over the last year or two, I've had a negative view of a pending recession. And I think the Fed, if you look at macro analyst, okay, one of my first tweets under that account that I created, by the way, early this year, in order to focus on macroeconomics, which I used to ignore. I created this account in January 2024 to focus solely on identifying what I got wrong and to learn from my mistake again. One of my first tweets was, if the Fed doesn't start cutting until until the end of June, I think we're going to have a recession start by the end of the year. And so I have an overall macro bearish view as well, which explains a portfolio of shorts. Does that answer your question too?
I mean, I don't know. I guess so. I was just it just seems like there's been a major shift happening, and I still don't understand the full picture of why, but yeah, I guess that explains. If you're looking at the community tracker and other stuff for information, I guess that can make sense.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome to ask other questions. Anybody is welcome to come up and ask questions and debate any specific position, whether it's Tesla or other of the 6-7 positions I listed. And I wish that you join us more often, because if you joined us more often, you wouldn't have these questions. Like a lot of people who've been joining these spaces daily over the last year or two, they know how my views are shaped, what underlies my views. And when new data comes, they have a better understanding of how I would react. It's not that surprising, I don't think. Also, the fact that the stock ran up 100% in the last 6 months. Luce?
Well, Yaman, my comment was for machine, but it was 15 minutes ago. Do you want me to say it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Machine, why do you think Optimus is needed to steer the fries in McDonald's, and they are not just gonna use some robot arms from the ceiling? So, why Optimus?
No, that's a good question. And I think for a place like McDonald's, you could argue, why not just have, there's so many McDonald's, why not just design a robot that's scalable, that's cheaper than Optimus to do these tasks? And I think you see that in a lot of industry, because there are actually a lot of robots in all various industries, right? So in some industries, though, there's some requirement for some dynamic change in abilities of what the labor force needs to do, right? And that's usually allocated to humans right now. So if a place like McDonald's isn't using robot arms, you have to think about what's the limiting factor. Is the limiting factor the technology, computer vision? It could be. Maybe it's just computer vision. They hadn't worked up. We could just use our arm, and we just needed to code better the deep learning to do the detecting how many fries to scoop or something. But it could also be, hey, where are we going to put this arm? And it's got to stay in this one place. Is it going to be able to move the fries from the fry bin into the containers and then deliver it to the next employee? Like, I don't work at McDonald's. I haven't thought about those details, but the benefit of Optimus obviously is the ability to move it around and retrain it to do other tasks as well. So for that case, maybe it's not needed, but there's gonna be a lot of cases where the tasks are simple, but they have to be adaptable and move around, where static robots can't work. So Optimus will work much better there. As for Yaman and AI driver, wondering what happened to Yaman? AI driver, back when you were Raspberry Pi driver, a little baby driver, probably with autopilot 2.5 and the thing could barely drive, Yaman was posting articles on Seeking Alpha in 2017, boasting about Tesla's FSD inevitability in a year or two. Totally out of control bullishness. And luckily, he's been exposed to me with my pants on and off, and has realized over time to become a much more reasonable investor. Such as in 2017, hardware 2.5, Tesla was taking in these low resolution cameras and downsampling them to even possibly ingest the data and provide some output. It was clear to any person with common sense and signal processing knowledge that they were nowhere near FSD level, robotaxi level. So I had to educate him over time, and he's slowly now coming to the point of understanding my point of view, which has been, this stuff's much harder than people assume. Even people with expertise in AI training who go and study, they push their glasses up their noses as they look at the chinchilla paper and look at these trends in other areas and say, oh, this is exactly how it's going to go for this other field. And not applying some common sense, probabilistic knowledge that, hey, sometimes there's hiccups. Things take longer than the best case. And that's what's happening with FSD. It's an excellent technology, but assuming it's going to go at a rate that the error rate's going to drop to the reliability needed, which is much higher than people assume, and I've gone over that many times, quickly, is just an aggressive assumption. And Yaman's just finally learning to take it easy. Finally.
All right. And obviously, this doesn't mean I'm not going to be wrong. I'm obviously going to be wrong. But I think my error rate this year has been much better than last year. So I guess that's a good sign. Moving in the right direction. Magic.
Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, so I heard. Well, first of all, congrats to Yaman. It's hard to change a position, and anybody that's a professional, anybody that's good, it's a tough thing to do. But that's what happens when the facts change, when the price comes completely detached from reality. You have to change your thesis, and that's what differentiates a cult from an investor, right? A cult speculator versus an investor. So applaud you for thinking rationally and independently, and probably offending a lot of people in the process, but it takes a lot of guts. So either way, applaud your position.
Thank you. And it did offend some people, but the thing is, like, the people who are unfollowing unsubscribing, canceling Patreon, support, etc., or stopping to come to Tesla Live are people who I don't want in this space anyway. So it's a bit of a silver lining that it aligns the space's audience and speakers better with the tweet that's pinned on my profile, which is Tesla Live welcomes both bulls and bears. We're looking for balanced discussions and to learn more. And ACDC, for example, started coming to Tesla Live again, and he is definitely one of the people who understands finance and investing better than most people, I think. So it's good to have him on the speaker board. All right. Anything else? Anything else? AI driver. So what do you expect from V13 when it starts rolling out? You're probably going to be one of the first vehicles to get it. What are you going to be? How are you going to measure its progress?
I made a post about it. I don't expect a lot of the issues that we're seeing to just be fixed overnight. Like, for example, there's an intersection around me that full self-driving has gotten wrong since version 12. And I honestly don't expect version 13 to fix it. But I do expect it to be able to do those the last part of the drive and the beginning of the drive, whether that's like backing out of your driveway and getting out itself onto the street or finding a parking spot at your destination. I think for a driverless worlds, those are considered critical interventions to Tesla anytime a driver is taking control. And I think just adding those beginning of the journey and end of journey features will get the intervention rate down quite a bit from what we're currently seeing. There's also other ways that they could do that as well. Something that I've said for a while is that I don't think they're able to just solve full self-driving everywhere all at once. It's not just going to roll out all over the US. They're going to restrict the cars heavily. I was even saying like adjusting the navigation routes, for example, not to go through dangerous intersections or stuff like that. Like that could easily drive up the miles per intervention dramatically, like overnight. If they just deployed, for example, in San Francisco, where the speed limits are only 25 and you only have square-shaped intersections, just like Waymo did at first, I think we'd be, even current versions of full self-driving would be I mean, obviously it can't even reverse yet, but I think it could safely drive through there, even on current versions. So that's my take.
Okay, thank you. If you could, okay, sounds good. Machine, anything else on your end? We have maybe 15 minutes left before we end the space. Or do you want to talk about anything on Tesla, or do you want to talk about MicroStrategy a little bit? Machine? And machine sending some
I'm curious about your thoughts about current FSD versions and limiting the scope of the drives, like I just mentioned. For somebody who's bearish on full self-driving, after seeing the last year of progress from manually coded to now fully end-to-end and the amount of progress we've seen, if they just limited the scope of where it drives, do you think it could be autonomous?
Yeah, I think Tesla can do what Waymo does in a city.
Okay. Do you realize what happens if they do that? Like if they have a autonomous car operating anywhere on Earth?
What happens? AI driver?
The patrons come back.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I don't think it's material to the stock if Tesla does one city or two cities or three cities. Like Waymo is losing billions of dollars today. The adoption rate is low. I think it's going to take a while. And
Don't mean to interrupt. Just to be clear, it's not material to Tesla if they have a driverless ride take place in a city somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, machine.
Maybe I'm changing the conditions of this. I don't know if a singular drive in a city would do much, But if they start deploying tens to hundreds of vehicles in even one city, and the performance in that city is excellent, then I think that is significant. That may take some time to evaluate and prove that it's performing at a high level. But I think even in one city, that would be significant, especially based on the way Tesla's architecting this entire modeling approach, which is to be robust.
Exactly.
Okay. So machine, when you say significant, can you define that?
It's going to have to be not getting in an accident, unsupervised, not getting in an accident.
No, that's not what I mean. Let's say you said tens or hundreds of vehicles, even in one city, would be significant. Significant to what? The stock price or the bottom line of the company?
The value, future discounted free cash flow estimates for the company probabilistically will go up with this information.
Okay, so neither is the answer you're giving me. And I want to be
The
clear to
stock
AI
price will
driver.
go up. The stock price
Okay.
will go up.
Okay, so I want to be clear to AI driver that it's not the stock price I worry about. It's the fundamentals of the business that we discussed in Tesla Live. To the fundamentals of the business.
No,
Hundreds
sure,
of
but
rise,
that's
hundreds
why
of
I'm
rise.
surprised that you have a short position, because a short position isn't like, oh, like it's not like a put where you just lose whatever you put in. Like, dude, if they put an autonomous car on the road and it does well, like a short position ruins you. I'm getting a phone call. I gotta hop out for like 5 minutes.
Okay, ACDC.
So that was kind of like my question, and I want to understand it from your perspective, Yaman, that your thesis is that that could happen in a limited setting, geofenced, and that's kind of already priced in, but in the meantime, their core business could suffer, and hence the valuation is a little high. Am I correct?
Yeah, when I take a position in a company, it's not because of one aspect of the company doing well or not. It's overall with sexy vehicles and Cybertruck and energy and macro and everything else that Tesla has its hands on. What's the intrinsic value and how does that compare to the current price of the company? And I think the price is higher than intrinsic value. So, and if 10 cars or 100 cars become FSD unsupervised or robotaxis in sometime 2025, it doesn't really change the intrinsic value, in my opinion. But I guess machine disagrees with that. Magic.
Hey, yeah, I mean, I was going to respond to, I think, AI driver, but I mean, it pretty much all the good news is pretty much priced in. It's hard. I mean, how much, almost 90% of the earnings come from the automotive sector. And a lot of people have the automotive sector at max $100 worth of the share price. So, I mean, how much, approximately $250 right now is priced in pretty much products that do not exist. Maybe they're close, but as of right now, they don't fully exist. So, I mean, what, 70% of the stock price is made up on products that don't exist yet, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're not saying it's this or that. It's already priced in 3 times over. So that's the argument. If the stock drops to about 100, I'll probably go long at that point. So this is not really a religion for me. It's all about valuation, and I think that's what you're getting to, and I think it's a good call. But what I was going to say is also it's a good list of shorts. I would say Carvana is another shitco, but yeah, that one's really hard. I wouldn't recommend shorting that thing. But that's apart from that list, Carvana is also, take a look at that stock. That's complete garbage as well.
Okay, thanks. ACDC.
I just want to kind of second what Magic said, that all of the stuff that's already priced in at that $250 of products that don't exist right now, that's a big valuation that the market is already giving in a market where everything is overpriced. So with your thesis of, and my expectation of the macro environment pulling back here, those valuations can shrink considerably It's really easy to give a high valuation right now when things are good, but those could drastically change still.
Yeah. AI driver, let me ask you something. Tesla stock doubled in the last 5 years, 5 months. 5 months. What do you think is driving that increase?
I think I honestly don't know much about Tesla, to be honest. I'm all about just the self-driving part of it. So it could be energy, it could be other things, it could be forward-looking people who are using full self-driving every day and seeing the amount of progress that's happening. Because this amount of progress wasn't happening in the first couple years of full self-driving. But it just like these conversations remind me of when I was working at Tesla in like 2018 and 2019, when everybody says, oh, like, how is the stock already this high? Everything's already priced in. They're not going to be able to scale production. They're not going to be able to do this. These are all pipe dreams and blah. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, it happens. And I feel like with full self-driving, we're seeing something very similar unfold, where it's happening in front of our eyes and everybody's focused on the automotive sales.
Well, I'm not focused solely on the automotive sales. We've only been discussing Optimus and FSD here. And in 2018, 2019, I was writing hundreds of articles published on Seeking Alpha and elsewhere, agreeing with the position that you said that you're on the side of. But today I'm on the other side. So how do you explain that?
I wondered the same thing, and that's why I'm here, is because if you were saying that, maybe a year or so ago before version 12, I think you'd have a pretty good footing to stand on. But, from what we're seeing happen with full self-driving and the amount of progress from version to version, I don't see how you can, like, it's weird that you'd be doing the opposite of what I expect. You know what I mean? Like, as we're seeing huge progress, you're becoming more bearish. And when we didn't see a big progress for a long period of time, you were the most bullish.
Okay, so I answered that at the beginning with the number 2 point at the top. I did not know that information before this year. I only learned it from a Gavin Baker interview. And then I went back to the data and I said, that actually makes sense on the FSD context. So does that explain why your prediction of my behavior is different from my behavior?
What data what data are you talking about here? Are you talking about the community?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good value of data. Like you asked what an intervention is, a critical disengagement. Nobody can give you a straight answer. How do you expect these people to fill out these forms and give you anything to really look at?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as long as the bias is consistent
How
in the
can the
data
bias be
entry.
consistent? It's different from every single person entering the numbers on their screen. It's
Right,
not.
but
That's the whole thing. Is it's not.
But that's not what I'm saying. The bias of the sample size overall is consistent. So there's a number of people who are too optimistic. There are a number of people who are too pessimistic entering data. And that portion is consistent over time, year over year over year, not version by version by version. Then that's good enough in my book. All right. Any other questions, comments for AI driver, ACDC, Magic, or Luce? Please request to speak. Tesla is down 1.5%, Nvidia down 3.3%. Apple flat, Rivian up 12% today. I also increased my short position in Rivian today. Added to my short position in GM. Added to my MicroStrategy short as well. On the other hand, the yield curve has come down drastically. So interest rates, treasury yields have come down. So that improves intrinsic values, all else equal. Oil price is down 3%. No economic releases today. And it's going to be a short week. Tuesday, we're going to get S&P Case-Shiller Home Price Index. There's a bunch of home data, consumer confidence and new home sales, FOMC minutes as well. And then Wednesday, we have a slew of data, mortgage applications, inflation data, initial week of claims, etc. So it's going to be a heavy on the macro front in the next 2 days. All right. If there are no other questions, comments, thank you very much to those of you who joined. Thank you very much to those of you who liked the video on YouTube. And we'll be back tomorrow, actually tonight, for AI Amateurs Space. In AI Amateurs, we discuss all non-Tesla AI news. Highly recommend even Tesla investors, bulls and bears, to join as well, because those discussions also inform discussions in Tesla Live. Thank you very much, and I'll chat with you all next time. Take care.